So how do you do that
Right,
though?
so-
Like, but how do you do that?
Right.
Like if you're in a marriage
Right.
and your husband, like as the wife, like you said, because it's normally the wife being like, if he saw me act crazy, he would be like, what the hell, and leave or something.
Right.
How do they do it?
A married man who cares about his wife and his family, does he love his wife at her worst? He would say yes. And she's more afraid to show that. She's more afraid that she'll be rejected by that. Right.
And I feel like a lot of times men are like, suck it up, or like, get over it. Like, I'm not saying they use those exact words, but that's what it feels like to a woman when she's in that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're a very emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent person. And I do feel like, though, that some women, even with their husbands or their spouse, don't feel like that, though.
I
don't feel like, and so they don't have the safe space. And maybe they've never had somebody be like, it's fine. Like, I still love you. Like, you are able to do that because of everything that you've learned. And men should come to you and if they need help with that or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because you do a really good job. But at the same time, I think that it's fair to say that some women don't have that at all. And so they still do have to be somewhat like afraid. Like, you're right that when you like do something like that and you realize, oh, like he's really not upset or he really doesn't love me less or he really, means what he's saying right now. Like, he's not judging me. That not all people have that.
Yeah. But you
So
need,
how do you do that though?
So,
like, but how do you do that? Like, if you're in a marriage and your husband, like as the wife, like you said, because it's normally the wife being like, if he saw me act crazy, he would be like, what the hell, and leave or something.
Right.
How do they do it? Like, I'm lucky that you treated it the way that you treated it, but what would you say to women who don't have that with the person that they're with?
I mean, I think that more women, again, maybe the man doesn't have necessarily the emotional intelligence, right? I mean, I study this. This is part of my life's work, right? I, like, both of us, we try to help people in this area. So it's not expected that every man is going to have necessarily the highest degree of emotional intelligence. But I do believe that most men that are good men, that they think the same way. That if you ask a married man who cares about his wife and his family, does he love his wife at her worst? He would say yes. And she's more afraid to show that. She's more afraid that she'll be rejected by that. And sometimes...
But does he show her that? Do you think? Because I agree that he probably does love her.
Right.
But in those moments, do you think he's making her feel loved? Because I think it's kind of like...
Yeah.
You had to be very careful with this. I'm going to be very careful with this.
Yeah.
And, I'm saying it as a woman who did do this last week. It is kind of like a kid throwing a temper tantrum a little bit.
Yeah.
And it can go multiple ways.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of times men are like, suck it up, or like, get over it. Like, I'm not saying they use those exact words, but that's what it feels like to a woman when she's in that moment.
Yeah.
And even if she knows he loves her or vice versa or things like that, that's not really going to help the situation.
Right.
But if she's acting that way and he like hugs her or he's like, it's going to be okay or something like that, that will actually make her feel like you love her despite those things. So you do almost have to treat it like a kid having a temper tantrum. Maybe that men need to do that so they'll have a little bit more empathy. Well,
because it's interesting. And again, we have to be careful with it because it can be misinterpreted. But when I am coaching guys, a lot of times I will say off the record, like I wouldn't say this publicly, which I'm saying publicly now, but a tampered down version of it, which is that you have to think of your relationship with a woman a lot like I said, a father figure before, and I think that's in the sense that you're dealing with someone who is an emotional creature, right, which is also the same with children in the sense that they haven't developed, they're not as in control of their emotions, whether they're boy or or girl. So it's not a derogatory thing in any way. It's just that the patience, right? It's like, but here's the thing. Again, if you use that same analogy, and this is what the distinction is, and this is why it matters and why it's okay in your case, but it's not okay in some cases, right? Is that if you have a child that's throwing a tantrum, right? If that child is constantly acting out, throwing tantrums, doesn't care what they say, just they're entitled, right? So that's why they're doing it, because they're entitled, right? That's a problem, and you need to deal with that problem, right? Encouraging that behavior is not good. You don't say to that child, "Oh, just let it out." Like, go ahead. Right. But if you have a child that is frustrated, right? That's not entitled, but is like just unable to control themselves. They're very upset. They're throwing themselves at the floor because they're very upset. They're not acting in such a way as like to be entitled. If you can tell, it's a high degree of distress that they can't emotionally deal with. So that's how they're trying to get it out. That you want to encourage and support them, not condemn them for displaying that emotion, right? Hopefully they'll learn to emotionally regulate and that doesn't become a regular occurrence. But even the best of us at times break down and fall on the floor and scream.
Well,
it
emotions
happens, right?
are a lot. And I think a thing for men to understand is how they feel when their emotions are at a high, right? Because men a lot of times talk about that they don't get the empathy from women in their lives.
Right.
And we can go into that as well too a little bit later in the episode because I think that's important. But men they can even look at their own instances where they've been really emotional and how it feels like even if you're in control of yourself and you have the wisdom, you know the right thing to do, you don't always do that because the emotions kind of take over.
Right.
You're so wrapped up in them that you don't, when you have a good enough grip on it.
Right.
But like you said, some of the times it's just such a high level or things have built up that you kind of let things out that maybe you wouldn't. And it's not saying that it's acceptable to do it all the time or, I still think that words, like really hurtful words, still shouldn't be said because they really shouldn't even be popping into your head like, I hate you.
Right.
Like, you would be devastated if your husband got angry or was trying to prove a point or something and was like, I hate you as a woman.
Yeah.
So, those things are still not acceptable, in my opinion. But, needing to shake yourself and because you're frustrated or something or things like that.
It's not even like you screamed and called me names or, or said anything to that effect, just to set the record straight. But that's that entitled, right? So it's like, if a woman is getting mad and not controlling her emotions at all, like her anger, and she's just screaming at her husband, calling him names, saying, I hate you, right?
Intentionally trying to hurt somebody when you're hurt is wrong.
He doesn't need to go over there and give her a hug and say it's going to be okay. He needs to set a boundary, right? If she's having a hard time and she's so frustrated that she screams or she's acting irrational and crying or whatever it is or shaking, that's a different thing. That's a different thing. And that's, again, it's not necessarily the thing that you want to necessarily handle your emotions in that way, but that's where empathy is needed in that case. It's not an entitled, right? Because there's a problem if a woman thinks, oh, I can just be emotional so I can do whatever, say whatever, and I expect the support of that, and I don't care what damage I'm doing to someone. It's another thing where a woman, she might even say a few things, right, or whatever, but she's not she doesn't come from an entitled space, and then when she does it, she feels bad about it because she didn't want to do that or unleash her emotions in a bad way on other people. So, so if that's the difference, right? So one is, again, like I said, if you did the child example of a tantrum, it's like, I don't care who I hurt by this.
Right.
The other is like
a tornado.
I messed up. I didn't mean to do this. I don't want to be this way. I have true sorrow for doing this type of thing. And so one of them, you have to handle that in a different way. That's what it really comes down to. So.
Right. Which I'm sure is hard for men because I think they have a hard time in general with women being emotional. And I think when they realize and accept that they married an emotional creature that is going to be emotional no matter what, but between the two of you both working on things that you can work on, you can navigate those things easier.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can understand, okay, is she like trying to hurt me and saying and intentionally mean things? I need to have a boundary at that point and be like, I'm not going to continue if you talk to me this way.
Right.
Well, we can continue talking when you calm down and you're not saying things like this. Versus, like you said, someone that's maybe just like having an outburst of frustration, but is upset that they even did that. Like they have the awareness and it wasn't malicious and things like that. So first, I would say that men need to understand that women are going to be emotional and they need to accept that. And it's not a bad thing. It's what makes her a woman.
Right.
But it is potentially going to be a lot to navigate in some ways when you're in a conversation with a woman or having an argument or things like that. But there are ways to handle it. And that sometimes what she needs in those frustrated moments is a hug and for you to tell her you love her. Something where she knows that you will love her even at her worst. And then she'll have less of those moments.
Exactly.
It's almost like you don't think it would work that way. I'm sure men are like, that doesn't seem like it makes much sense. But it makes all the